Sarah, thank you for bringing such a beautiful child into this world. Let's build a happy life together. Oh, you're such a softie, she chuckled. A man cradling a newborn, tears glistening in his eyes, while a woman gazed at them affectionately. To an outsider, it might have looked like the perfect picture of familial bliss. But the man with tears in his eyes was my husband, James Smith. And the woman watching warmly was my sister, Sarah. This wasn't a scene of family happiness. It was a betrayal that made my stomach churn. I steeled myself and stepped into their line of sight. James and Sarah froze, shock etched across their faces. But there wasn't a hint of remorse in their eyes. You wouldn't have a baby, so I did it for you, Sarah said, her voice cold. That's right, I'm leaving you for Sarah. We're going to be happy together, James declared. Fine, if that's how they wanted to play it. But they'd still face the consequences I'd prepared. As if on cue, 30 of our relatives appeared behind me. All of them from the Smith family, James's relatives. As James and Sarah paled, I plastered on a saccharine smile, ready for my coup de grace. Congratulations. I hope you two will be very happy together. My name is Patricia Smith, and I'm 30 years old. I don't have children, but until recently, I thought I had a quiet life as an ordinary office worker with my husband, James. We met through a mutual friend and tied the knot 2 years ago. But our married life was far from a fairy tale. As soon as we said, "I do," James became distant. He did his share of the housework, but his attitude towards me was indifferent at best. He wasn't enthusiastic about starting a family either. Lately, we'd been sleeping in separate bedrooms, more like roommates than newlyweds. Was I not attractive as a woman? I'd sigh as I looked at myself in the mirror. My plain appearance stared back at me, dredging up painful memories. I'd been overshadowed by my beautiful older sister, Sarah, since childhood. Due to some genetic lottery, Sarah was exceptionally stunning, even within our family. She stood out at every family gathering, showered with praise and adoration. Our parents didn't treat us differently based on looks, but the disparity became glaringly obvious when relatives were around. She could be a movie star, they'd gush. She looks just like a young actress. These compliments only fueled Sarah's ego and her disdain for me. Patricia, doesn't it depress you to be so ordinary? She'd taunt when we were alone. No, it doesn't, I'd stammer. Really, I'd be mortified if I looked like you. I'd be too embarrassed to leave the house. She'd punctuate her cruelty by pulling my hair or mocking my features. I never told our parents about Sarah's bullying. I didn't want to upset them. In my naivety, I didn't realize that my silence only emboldened her. My self-esteem, constantly eroded by my sister's barbs, was fragile at best. I lived my life trying not to draw attention, having lost all confidence in myself. But I could never escape Sarah's shadow. Even when I liked someone, Sarah would swoop in and steal them away. In middle school, I was heartbroken when the senior I had a crush on started dating Sarah. Patricia, I'm so sorry. That guy was really persistent. I see. Well, it's not like you could have held on to him anyway. I remember crying all night when I found out. My eyes were so puffy the next day. But what shocked me more was how quickly Sarah lost interest in him. When she dumped him, she seemed to relish my despair. I couldn't compete with Sarah's looks or figure. So I decided to focus on my studies instead. We were such different sisters. Around the time I entered high school, my parents, who seemed to have a decent relationship, suddenly divorced. The abrupt split left me reeling. My father took me in, while Sarah went with our mother. I felt sad about being separated from Mom, but I was more relieved to be away from Sarah. I haven't seen Sarah since then. Occasionally, I hear updates through my father, like Sarah's in college or She's working as a secretary at a local company, but I don't really care. When I got married, I informed my mother but didn't say anything to Sarah. I thought I was finally free from her shadow. But I would soon learn that Sarah was far worse than I ever imagined. One day, there was a middle school reunion. My memories of middle school weren't great because of Sarah, but I did have some good classmates. I spent a nostalgic evening with old friends at a hotel. Among them was Jennifer Brown, our former class president, always reliable and caring. After some small talk, she surprised me by saying, "By the way, Patricia, congratulations on becoming an aunt. Your sister had a baby, right?" "What? A baby?" I was taken aback, and Jennifer seemed just as surprised by my reaction. "Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. I just assumed you knew because she looks so pregnant." Actually, our parents divorced when we were in high school, so we live separately now. Sarah has a child. Jennifer nodded apologetically. She worked as a nurse at a local hospital and had seen Sarah coming in for prenatal checkups. Feeling guilty for revealing a patient's private information, Jennifer looked embarrassed. "I see. So they divorced. I'm sorry. Please keep this between us." Of course. But the news that Sarah was pregnant shocked me. I hadn't heard anything about her getting married. Was she planning to be a single mom? I hadn't heard anything from my father, but maybe my mother knew the details. When I got home, I called my mother to confirm. She sounded tired, but confirmed it was true. "Yes, that's right, but she won't tell me who the father is. Still, she's determined to have the baby. I've told your father. But there's nothing we can do since she's made up her mind." I see. My father had probably tried to keep it from me to avoid causing me worry. My mother also expressed her concern for me, assuring me that I wouldn't be troubled by it. Since my parents were already divorced, Sarah's pregnancy wasn't really my concern. Feeling slightly relieved, I ended the call. Just then, James came home. Right now, my worries are more about James than Sarah. As usual, he barely glanced at me and said indifferently, "There's going to be more overtime from now on." What, even more than now, is work that demanding? Of course, you wouldn't understand. Working at some small company, I'm the future president. I'm not like you, just coasting along. Even though I'm not just coasting, his words stung. But I always freeze up when confronted, so I could only muster a weak, "I'm sorry." As long as you get it. James seemed satisfied with my response and headed for the shower. That's when a sweet scent wafted from him. It smelled like women's perfume, and my heart skipped a beat. Could James be cheating on me? Is that why he's been so cold? The thought of another woman behind his icy behavior made my stomach churn. One Saturday, James had an overnight company training session. When I asked where and what kind of training it was, he brushed me off. "Why do you need to know? It's none of your business." This only fueled my suspicions. I was almost certain he was meeting another woman. Amid this anxiety, I got a call from someone who made me even more uneasy. It was Sarah. We hadn't been in touch since our parents' divorce. Wondering what she wanted, I nervously answered the phone. "Hello. Patricia, long time no see." Sarah started the conversation with the same bubbly tone as always. She's 31 now, but she still talks like a teenager. After some small talk, Sarah got to the point. "Mom told me you found out about my pregnancy." "Yeah, Sarah. Are you really going through with it?" "Of course, you'll be an aunt. I'll let you know when the baby arrives." I wasn't exactly thrilled, but I had to ask what was really bothering me. "Who's the father? Mom's really worried." "Don't worry, he didn't run off. It's just complicated." Complicated. At that moment, I heard a man's voice in the background calling Sarah. The low, familiar tone made my skin crawl. Just a sec, I'm on the phone. Sarah hurriedly covered the receiver and spoke to the man. Sorry, did you hear that? What? No, is someone there? I forced myself to sound calm as I replied. I couldn't let her know I had figured something out. I made that decision in a split second. No one. Sarah, sounding relieved, began to wrap up the conversation. And then she chuckled mischievously. All right, see you later, Patricia. After ending the call, I collapsed weakly on the spot. 3 months later, I received a cheerful message from Sarah. The baby was born safely. It's a beautiful baby boy. The message included a photo of the adorable newborn, radiating joy. I replied to Sarah with a terse congratulations. Just then, James, who had been lounging on the couch behind me, suddenly sprang to his feet. He paced nervously around the living room, clutching his phone. Watching him calmly, I asked, What's wrong, James? Why are you so fidgety? Oh, it's nothing. James, rarely one to evade questions, didn't even notice my icy stare. 5 days later, James claimed he had an urgent errand and left, but I knew exactly where he was going. After he left, I swiftly set my plan in motion. For 3 months, I had meticulously prepared my retaliation. After making all the necessary calls, I took a taxi to a specific location. I arrived at a large hospital in the city. As I waited at the entrance, a jubilant couple walked toward me from the lobby. James cradling a baby joyfully in his arms, and Sarah looking smug after her major accomplishment. Sarah, thank you for giving birth to such a beautiful baby. Let's build a happy life together. You're being so sentimental. Today was Sarah's discharge day. Witnessing this scene made my head spin. But I couldn't afford to lose my composure now. Steeling myself, I stood firmly in front of the unsuspecting couple as they exited the hospital. Patricia, what on earth are you doing here? You came. Yes, James's affair was with none other than Sarah. The voice I had heard on the phone that day was indeed James's. I had suspected it, but confirmed the affair through a detective agency. With arms crossed, I glared at them with a mixture of rage and contempt. I'm here to visit Sarah, but I never imagined her partner would be James. You two look so content. But happiness built on betrayal never lasts. What did you say? How dare you? James was clearly rattled by my uncharacteristically bold demeanor. Despite being the one at fault, he lashed out at me. Sarah, standing beside him, also hurled insults as if I were the wrongdoer. You wouldn't have a baby, so I had one for you. That's right, I'm divorcing you and building a life with Sarah. James emphasized the word divorce, probably thinking it would devastate me, but I remained unfazed. I was already prepared for divorce. I came here today to make these two face the consequences of their actions. I raised my right hand. It was a signal for my allies to approach. You're the one being arrogant, don't you think? Isn't that right, everyone? And behind me, about 30 allies stood in a row. They were the Smith relatives, James's family. James was so shocked he nearly collapsed at the sight of them. Dad, Mom, even my uncles. Like me, their eyes were blazing with anger, especially my in-laws. James couldn't meet their gaze, so he glared at me and shouted, Patricia, how could you? Dragging my family into this is a new low. But his father cut him off. The only one stooping low here is you, James. Dad. When I heard about this, I called everyone here to set you straight. James, what have you done? Standing beside him, my mother-in-law, fighting back tears, added, "An affair with Patricia's sister, and you even had a child. What were you thinking?" James's father, the company president, felt deeply betrayed, having groomed James as his successor. James's mother, worried about the family's reputation, found his betrayal equally unacceptable. I had gathered evidence through a detective agency. When I informed my in-laws, they sided with me over James. James had always been self-centered and had lost their trust long ago. But James, true to form, didn't see his actions as wrong. "I'm divorcing Patricia and marrying Sarah. I'll file for divorce, then submit the marriage and birth certificates. The order is correct." His audacity was astounding. His father, furious on my behalf, spoke up again. "It's not about the order, it's about basic human decency, something you clearly lack." Then he turned to a man standing nearby. "A person like you can't lead this company. Richard will be the next president. You're out." "Dad." Richard, James's younger brother, and my brother-in-law, gave James a cold look. "I'm really disappointed in you, brother. If you can't even honor your own family, how can you be trusted with the company?" "Richard, you." James glared at Richard. And Sarah, hearing that James was out of the company, turned ashen. "James, you said your family accepted us." "Sarah, now's not the time." "Not the time. This is the crucial part." James and Sarah started bickering loudly. James had apparently told Sarah that their remarriage was accepted by the family. But it was all a fabrication. James had deceived both me and Sarah. "Unbelievable. I thought it would be fun to steal you, being Patricia's husband and the next president." "Sarah, if you can't be president, you're useless." I was the one who spoke up, telling them to wait. I couldn't let her comment about stealing for fun slide. "Sarah, do you really find it that enjoyable to take my husband from me?" I could hardly believe it. But Sarah confirmed it, without a hint of remorse, saying with glee, "Of course, it's the ultimate thrill to take something from you. When I heard your husband was the future president, I was ecstatic. Stealing him would be fun, and I'd marry into wealth. That's why I had the baby. But losing the president position was a major miscalculation." I had learned from the detective agency that James and Sarah met by chance. When she returned his forgotten umbrella, but Sarah's words revealed it was all part of her scheme. She knew he was my husband and deliberately approached him. I felt like I was facing a demon. The Smith relatives seemed to share my sentiment, looking at me with sympathy. I was overwhelmed with anger and on the verge of tears. Then my parents, who had been concealed among the Smith family, stepped forward. I had invited them today. They had been watching in shock but couldn't bear Sarah's attack on me. Standing before me with a mix of sadness and fury, my father shouted, "That's enough, Sarah." "Dad, Mom too." My mother strode briskly up to Sarah. She raised her right hand and slapped Sarah's cheek, tears streaming down her face. "What are you doing?" "That's my line, having James's child. What was the point of us pretending to divorce?" "Pretending to divorce?" Holding her cheek, Sarah was dumbfounded. Through her tears, my mother explained, "Sarah had always been cruel to me. I had tried to hide it, but my parents had noticed. They initially thought we were just quarrelsome siblings, but as we entered our teens, they realized Sarah's obsession with me was severe and dangerous. Fearing that Sarah might ruin my life, my mother suggested to my father that they separate. Indeed, Sarah often insulted my appearance, hit me over minor things, and stole my crushes. My parents noticed and grew increasingly concerned. So they separated us under the guise of a divorce. They didn't explain the reason to us because I tried to hide Sarah's harassment, and they wanted to respect my feelings. Also, they knew Sarah wouldn't accept the truth, so they framed it as their own decision. When I consulted them about James and Sarah, they revealed this to me. I was surprised but also touched by their love. Sarah, oblivious to all this, was astonished. Pretending to divorce. Why would you? Because you kept tormenting Patricia, but we never imagined it was this bad. We should have separated you too much sooner. Exactly. It's disgraceful to use your child for such schemes even as an adult. My parents, berating Sarah, stood firmly by my side. Their support gave me strength. I wouldn't be swayed by my toxic sister anymore. I smiled and addressed the two betrayers. I'm done. I'm ending things with you now. Congratulations. I hope you're happy. These were my sincere words of farewell. After the confrontation with James and Sarah in front of the hospital, the relatives swiftly departed, leaving me with strong words of support, promising to help if needed. Jennifer, the nurse, seemed to have witnessed the commotion and later asked, "What happened?" I was at a loss, but I felt I owed her an explanation since she had informed me about Sarah. She was shocked but became my ally. She even joked about throwing salt at Sarah if she saw her again, making me laugh. The divorce process with James proceeded smoothly. With support from my in-laws, I received a substantial settlement from James and Sarah. However, the emotional wounds took longer to heal. That's only natural. The betrayal cut deep. I endured it thanks to the support from my in-laws, Jennifer's encouragement, and most importantly, my parents' unwavering support. Despite their difficult position, they stood by me throughout the ordeal. I was profoundly grateful. My parents regretted not acting sooner, not realizing the depth of Sarah's obsession with me. Even I hadn't imagined Sarah would go this far. I never blamed my parents. Meanwhile, James and Sarah, unable to turn back, officially married. Though they became a couple, Sarah soon lamented that her life wasn't what she had envisioned. I was supposed to be a president's wife, not living in poverty. James, ousted from the company, had no significant assets. As announced, Richard, his brother, was appointed the next president, leaving James without a place to return. James, who had always relied on his father's influence, struggled to find another job and eventually ended up doing manual labor as an apprentice. He worked hard to support Sarah and the child, but his efforts didn't satisfy her. Sarah eventually left James, abandoning their child. This left James in despair, and he was broken. He tried to manage as a single father, but it was too much for him, and he had to ask his parents for help. Seeing their son's plight, my in-laws took in their grandchild and cared for him. But James became a shell of his former self. The Smith family pitied the child, who was deprived of decent parents, and supported my in-laws in raising their grandchild. James completely abandoned his parental duties and disappeared, prompting the family to search for him to secure child support. James likely believed his feelings for Sarah were genuine. Sarah's beauty and mysterious charm had always captivated people. Even in middle school, she ruthlessly discarded the boy I liked. She hadn't changed at all. Really, such a foolish child. This is what happens when you don't marry for love, my mother said sadly. I sold the house I had shared with James and moved into an apartment. I started spending more time with my parents, enjoying the family time we had missed. It was a slow, peaceful process of healing from my childhood wounds. Later, I was assigned a major project at work. Are you sure I'm suitable to be the leader? Brown, you have a strong sense of responsibility and are capable. Plus, your perseverance is a great asset, said my boss, Mr. Williams, who appointed me as the project leader. However, I still lacked confidence. Is that so? I felt that my patience had only enabled Sarah's bad behavior. But Mr. Williams' next words touched me. Those in leadership positions often have to exercise great patience, but what matters is the ability to make decisions when it counts without being crushed by the burden. I believe you possess that strength. Thank you, Mr. Williams. There were people who truly saw me. I realized that all my efforts hadn't been in vain. With this newfound confidence, I accepted the role of leader and threw myself into my work. Despite James mocking our small company, its performance improved rapidly. I don't know how much of that was due to my efforts, but my superiors seemed to appreciate my hard work. My salary increased significantly, and I could now live more comfortably than before. Enjoying my single life again, I found myself at 33 years old. 3 years after the divorce drama. One night, I returned to my apartment late. Exhausted but fulfilled from work. Standing in front of my door was a figure in a hood, their face wrapped in bandages. I tensed up, thinking it was a suspicious person. They radiated a negative aura that almost looked ghostly. But when they looked at me and spoke, I was shocked to recognize them. Patricia, please help me. That voice, Sarah. The suspicious person was Sarah. How do you know where I live? I followed you from your office once. Sarah admitted to her stalker-like behavior without remorse. Her skin, visible through the bandages, looked discolored. I had no idea why she looked like that, and I was alarmed, but she just cried. Not wanting to attract attention from passersby, I let her inside. After calming down with some tea, she explained. Sarah had suffered a series of botched cosmetic surgeries. It wasn't just a single failure. She had undergone multiple procedures, experienced skin problems, and in her desperate attempts to fix them, even altered her bone structure, reaching a point of no return. She had essentially dug herself into a hole. She said she could no longer work and had quit her job. Look at this. She showed me her face, which was no longer the beautiful face I remembered. Her skin was red like burn scars, and her nose and mouth were different from before. The drastic change left me speechless. Why did you get surgery? You didn't need it. Sarah, who had always been praised for her beauty, shook her head bitterly. That wasn't enough. I needed to be more beautiful, to catch a better man, and finally be happy. Her words sent chills down my spine. Despite taking my husband and abandoning her child, she was still focused only on herself. Moreover, her efforts were misguided. Sarah glared at me as I struggled to find words. Patricia, you've certainly improved your appearance. You must be making good money now. I still need more surgeries. Lend me some money. Why should I lend you money after you stole my happiness? It wasn't just my husband. Even my childhood memories were marred by Sarah's constant interference. I had endured it all with my patience, but I was no longer that child. 3 years ago, I decided to hold James and Sarah accountable. No matter how much she begged, I wouldn't forgive her now. You were born beautiful, but wishing for others' misfortune led you to this. You should face your own heart, not your appearance. Patricia. Sarah, you felt happy by making me miserable. But true happiness doesn't come from others' misery. Face yourself honestly. These words, which I had long wanted to say, seemed to hit the mark. Sarah collapsed onto the table, sobbing. She was just a foolish woman who had misunderstood the shape of happiness for years. But I felt neither obligation nor pity to save her. I quietly watched my sister's small, hunched back. After a while, Sarah left, utterly dejected. Her retreating figure looked more fragile than ever before. Sarah, who could only find happiness in others' misfortune, would have a hard path facing herself. A year later, I heard surprising news from my mother, who occasionally checked on Sarah. Sarah found a job. Yes, it's a temporary position as a building cleaner. I'm relieved she finally started working. My mother, who had aged noticeably, said with a hint of relief. Sarah, who once worked glamorously as a secretary, now had to settle for cleaning buildings. Her pride had kept her unemployed for a long time, and I worried about the burden on our parents. Sarah probably chose this job because she could wear a mask and avoid meeting people, but I doubted she would last long in such a position. My fears were confirmed when, less than a month into her new job, Sarah showed her true colors. She stole cash from the company's safe. Shockingly, James, who had been missing, reappeared as her accomplice. They had secretly kept in touch. The company they targeted had been a client during James's tenure, and they knew the layout and security measures. Using their inside knowledge, they executed the crime. However, the security system quickly identified them, leading to their arrest and indictment. The Smith family, who had been searching for James, were furious at this malicious act. Already despised for their actions involving me, the two had completely turned the Smith family against them. My in-laws, who had been raising their grandchild diligently, declared they would never forgive this betrayal. That foolish son is no longer my concern. I'm cutting all ties with him. Where did we go wrong? My mother, who met them at court, recounted their sorrowful words. Naturally, my parents also disowned Sarah completely. Sentenced for theft, Sarah was told she would receive no help after her release. Why? Why are you abandoning me? Sarah, you're an adult now. Reflect on the crimes you committed and live independently. Just because we're family doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. Patricia and we have our own lives. So you need to stand on your own feet. My parents told her firmly during the visitation. Sarah finally hung her head and couldn't say anything. Now, my parents live together in a new home. I've also moved to a different apartment, so Sarah doesn't know where any of us are. James and Sarah, thinking only of themselves, ended up committing crimes. Only God knows what will become of them after they're released. Meanwhile, at 34 years old, I continue to work diligently. Our company has grown and even built a new office near the station. As a mid-level manager, I now have many subordinates. I am now an assistant manager and Mr. Williams' right hand. Brown, I want to discuss the upcoming project. Sure, shall we meet in the conference room? Mr. Williams leaned in and whispered, I found a great restaurant. How about we discuss it there? Mr. Williams, we should keep things professional. Oh, sorry. He gave a sheepish smile. Lately, Mr. Williams has been showing interest in me. At first, I was confused, but I've always admired him, so I wasn't entirely opposed. However, after my previous marriage, I was hesitant to commit. He always tells me, I'll wait for you, which I appreciate. But as long as it's not about the project, that's fine. What? Aren't you going to take me to that restaurant? When I said that, Mr. Williams' face lit up. His straightforward demeanor, like a big, friendly dog, has been growing on me. It might take some more time, but I plan to nurture this newfound happiness at my own pace. Finally, I've found my own path to happiness.